You have already seen the slide. I had sent it to you in the WhatsApp group. What you see here is the agenda for our 9th free session for German A1 level, of course, for daily life. Please pause if you want to have a look at it. If you happen to join the session for the first time, then welcome to the sessions. This is our 9th session, just so you know that. If you wish to join further live sessions, then you can reach out to us at this email address over here displayed at the bottom of the screen in the middle. Many of you already know the intention behind offering these sessions. These sessions are not explicitly designed to prepare you for any language exam. In these sessions, you will learn some important A1 level German lessons that you may need in your daily life. Please don't try to read the content of this slide right now. Just listen to me. You can come back to this slide at the end of the session. Let's do a recap of whatever you have learned so far. And you should always try to do this check mentally, what all you have already learned. Let's go through some key learnings together. You know how to exchange greetings. My request to you is that you should refrain from using hello all the time. When you are learning German for the first time, you should try to use different greetings such as Guten Morgen, Guten Tag, Guten Abend. Also, if you are already in Germany, then please try to observe which greetings are used in your German speaking social or professional circle. For example, I've seen that people use Mahlzeit instead of saying Hallo or Guten Morgen. Of course, you should know how to ask another person how they are doing and respond to a similar question. I believe you are now grammatically fit to frame simple sentences. Also, you can now write simple W-word questions as well as yes or no kind of questions. Quite frequently, you will be talking about people who are not present during the conversation. For that, you need to know the correct pronouns. And you already know that. I think it is safe to assume that you can read German numbers up to 1000 now. Also, you are on a pretty good track if you can introduce yourself in simple sentences. I think you can now understand which articles you need to use in daily life. Also, if you know how to ask yes or no questions, if you know how to frame these yes or no kind of questions, then you know to give instructions, you just have to replace the question mark with a full stop. And my favorite is how to give in directions, or how I like to think of it is how to show someone the way to door. Also, you learned how to ask what time is it. I don't think you will ask someone what time is it, but this might happen that someone asks you what time is it, and then you should know how to answer that. You know there are 6 Modalverben in German and how to use them, what they mean, and when to use them. Also, you know a few words that you can use to specify time, time duration, and other things related to time. You also now know accusative and dative. You have been introduced to Wechselpräpositionen. Uh, these what comes after them sometimes can be dative, sometimes can be negative. Generally, you should think if there is some action being described in the sentence, then it's accusative. If there is no action, there is no movement, then it is dative. In the last session, we did go into detail about pronouncing German words correctly. So I hope you remember that. If not, please go back to that last session video. Okay. Uh, I have been requesting you to start journaling in German. Many of you have been doing this as well. For those who now want to start journaling, this is one example how you may start. You don't need to write complicated sentences. You can just write simple one-line sentences in English. For example, I wake up, I boil water, I add coffee powder, I come back home, I buy fruits and vegetables, I cook dinner. Such simple sentences. And then you should try to translate them or just write them in German. Initially, you should try to write in German without using any online translation tools. You have made a diary where you write verbs and nouns that you may need in your daily life. Try to use them without referring to your diary, because now by now you should remember these verbs and nouns. But once you reach the last sentence on your list, then if there was some sentence which you were not sure how to write that, write this or them in German, then you can take help of online tools. But after that, add those verbs and nouns or words to your vocabulary so that tomorrow when you are writing again, you don't have to take help of any online tool. By the way, you don't really need to write it like this. You don't have to describe your entire day. If if for you being able to understand and speak in your work meetings is important, then focus there. What sentences you normally speak or you have to understand during those meetings. Or you are someone who just finished his master's and is going to have job interviews, then focus there. What kind of questions they may ask and what kind of answers you can give, and write them in German. My personal favorite is dialogue from your favorite movie or series. Here you don't even have to write, you just have to watch the movie in German. Please, when you're doing this, do it without subtitles. If you do it with subtitles, it's just 20% effective if you ask me. To do it without subtitles. It might be difficult at the beginning, but because these are your favorite movie or series, you don't really have to understand what you're watching. I mean, because you have seen them enough number of times, once you just see the scene, you know what they're talking about, is what I'm trying to say. You don't need the subtitles. There are some other examples over here. Calling to get information about a job advertisement. If you happen to have kids in Germany, then you might, I'm pretty sure that there are some parent-teacher meetings being organized regularly, and there you can think of scenarios, things that you talk with the teacher and with other parents and write them in German. Here are just simple uh, corresponding German sentences. There are other ways to write the same. So you can do it like this. All right, let's start with today's agenda. Uh, so today, all right. Uh, so today you will learn how to talk about past events in German. If you remember from the session where we looked at how to conjugate verbs in German, then you will know conjugating a verb depends usually on two aspects. One is the tense or the time which your sentence is describing. Other is the kind of verb, regular, mixed, or irregular verb. Now, when you are talking about past events, you have two options. One is to use preteritum. The other is to use participe zwei or participe perfect. Usually, you don't need to use preteritum that often, but participe zwei is something you would be using quite a lot. The reason is that preteritum is usually used while you are well, you will encounter this when you are reading a newspaper or you're reading a novel or something like that. All right. There is also one more difference between these two, and that is participe zwei usually describes past events which are done now. So preterito may sometimes mean you are talking about events which were happening in the past. Okay, so I hope you can understand the difference. But I think for you, participe zwei is more important for daily life. For, as they say, gesprochenes Deutsch. For spoken German, participe zwei or participe perfect is more relevant. There can be even more differences between them. We can talk about them in later sessions. As I said, you will see preteritum when you are reading a book or a newspaper. Usually, participe zwei is usually used in spoken German, or as they say, gesprochenes Deutsch. There are a few exceptions for preteritum though. Verbs like haben, sein, wissen, heißen, finden, denken, and the six Modalverben uh, wünschen, dürfen, sollen, müssen, können, wollen. Uh, you need to know their preteritum form as well, because quite often you will use them in spoken German as well. Please remember this. Let's see how you can use participe zwei or participe perfect to describe past events and what what is the syntax of the sentence for that is. So on this slide, you see the usually followed syntax. The verb in participe zwei form will be at the last position, usually at the last position. Then additionally, you need to use the verb sein or haben as well. It will be at the second position. Now the subject, as you know, is either before or after the verb. If there is nothing before this verb, then it takes the position before the verb. If there is something over here, then it will come after the verb. Here, when I say verb, I mean either sein or haben. If you happen to have objects in your sentences and one is direct and another is indirect, then please remember the dative object will be before the accusative object. Another way to say the same is the accusative object is after the dative object. That is a rule. You should now understand that when you are using sein or haben, you should conjugate these verbs as per the subject. Also, these conjugations are for present tense. It might be confusing conjugation in present tense describing sentence past. That's how it is. Just accept it. So here you see the conjugation you need. I hope you know when to use bin, when to use bist. Bin is first person singular, bist is second person singular, informal. I also hope you know when to use hut, when to use habt. Hut is third person singular, habt is third person uh, second person plural informal. Okay, I hope it's clear what I'm trying to say over here. If not, please refer to our previous sessions. Okay. If you have been paying attention, then you must have realized that two new features for describing past when you use participe zwei are the use of the verb sein or haben and the verb itself in participe zwei form. By the way, in this scenario, the verb sein or haben is referred to as Hilfsverb, meaning usually helping verb. Now, when to use sein and when to use haben, you need to have, there's a rule for that as well. And there is one simple rule. If the verb in participe zwei form is describing movement or change in state or change of status, then you use the verb sein. Otherwise, you can just simply use the verb haben. When I say use the verb haben, I mean the conjugated form of haben for present tense as per the subject in the sentence. This might sound very simple, however, it will feel difficult at least for the next 1 week if you are a beginner, when to use sein, when to use haben. Some examples for when to use sein are verbs like laufen, fahren, rennen, gehen, springen, fliegen, joggen, schwimmen. Please remember, if you are talking about swimming and you want to say I swam, then you will say, even though this is movement, but you still have to use, normally you should use haben, because when you say I swam, generally it is you have to use haben. It's difficult to explain that. But if you're saying you swam from one point to another, then you will use the verb sein. So you will say ich habe geschwommen, but if you want to say I swam to the other end, then you will say ich bin zum anderen Ende geschwommen. I hope you could notice the difference. As I said, it will get easier with more practice. Most of the times you can just use haben, but there will be some places where you have to use sein. In spoken German, when you are learning A1, I'm not talking about exam, but I'm talking about when you're in Germany, when you're talking other Germans. If you do this mistake of using sein when you have to use haben, or use haben when you have to use sein, nobody will point it out. I mean, if they are your friend, they will point it out, but it's not that big a deal when you just have A1, okay? It will be a big deal after A1, but please understand what I'm trying to say. All right. Also, you have to learn how to, you have to learn the participe zwei form of the verb you are using, how to find the participe zwei form of verbs. If you ask me, it is always a good idea to just learn them by rote. But since many of you are beginners, here are some hints that may help you. When you want to find the participe zwei of a regular verb, you start with GE, the alphabet G and the alphabet E. Then you have the verb stam. This is the verb without its ending. Then you add the alphabet T or the alphabets E and T at the end. When you add T or ET at the end depends on a few rules. If the verb stem is ending in the alphabet T for tiger or D for dog, then you add T. If the verb stem ends in the alphabet M for monkey or N for nylon, and just before M or N there is a consonant not a vowel, then you add the alphabet T for tiger. For usually all other regular verbs, you add the alphabets E and T at the end to get the participe zwei form. I hope you could follow that. Now, uh, also, you don't need GE when the verb has an inseparable prefix. You don't need GE when the verb ends in IEREN. You need GE when the verb in its infinitive form does not have a prefix. That is, it's just a verb without a prefix. If there is a prefix, then the prefix has to be separable. That means the verb should be a trennbare verb. For mixed verbs, the rule for mixed verbs is pretty much similar to the regular verbs, usually, but there are exceptions as well. Here, the main exception is uh, you have to take the verb stem and modify it. And there are several sub-rules as to how you may modify the verb stem, which we will cover in the next sessions. Now for irregular verbs, if you ask me, forget about the rules. There are many rules. Please learn just the verbs that you need, their participe form by just write them down and remember them by heart. But for beginners, there are some patterns though. The verbs lesen, sehen, gehen, you just have to add ge at the beginning to get their participe form as I have presented it over here on the slide. You will see other patterns as well in the coming sessions. For now, just try to, as I said, the verbs that you need to use in the past tense, just learn their participe form. All right. Let's now look at how you can use preteritum in a sentence. It's pretty straightforward. There is no change in the sentence structure. This is how a normal sentence also looks like. But the verb over here, you have to conjugate the verb as per preteritum. Here also you can do that very easily for most of the regular verbs. For example, the verb lernen, you remove the ending, you are left with lern, which is referred to as verb stem. Now add the alphabets T for tiger and E for elephant at the end to get the conjugated preteritum for first person, singular. Now add test to get conjugated preteritum for second person, singular, informal. Add te again at the end to get the conjugated preteritum for third person, singular. You add te and t to get the preteritum for third person, plural. I'm sorry, you have to add tet for second person, plural, and informal. You can add ten for both for first person, plural, or second person, singular, formal, and this small se is for third person, plural, yeah, third person, plural, informal. I'm sorry, it's not informal, it's just third person and plural. Okay, there is nothing such as formal or informal for third person. All right. Then the pronoun man. You already learned in the last session how to use this pronoun man. Please don't confuse it with the M-A-N-N, that means man in German. This man, this M-A-N, pronounced again as similarly as man, is a pronoun you use for third person without any further context. Okay, so you just want to talk about third person, you don't know whether it is er, s, z, then you just use man. To make it easier for you to understand, in English we sometimes use the number one. So we say one must do that, one must not do that. So something like that. We also have a man in German. For example, you want to say one must not smoke in the office, then you will say man muss im Büro nicht rauchen, or man darf im Büro nicht rauchen. If you want to say what is possible, what is allowed and what is not allowed. Also, if you want to say one should not drink too much alcohol, then you will say man soll nicht zu viel Alkohol trinken. I hope you got the idea. Conjunctions und, oder, aber. I noticed that many of you have actually used this in your homework, so good job. But let's just look at them one more time. So you can think of und as the English and, you can think of oder as the English or, you can think of aber as the English but. This sentence is pretty obvious. Ich kaufe Obst und Gemüse. This as well. But what is interesting over here is how you say it out loud. As you notice, there are brackets over here. So you may add the verbs sprechen or verstehen, but you don't necessarily have to. What do I mean by this? So you can say ich kann Deutsch und Englisch, or you can say ich kann Deutsch und Englisch sprechen, ich kann Deutsch und Englisch verstehen. Few more examples. Uh, so let's say you are a programmer and you just want to say I I can program in Python and C Sharp, right? So you don't have to say ich kann in Python und C Sharp programmieren. If you just say ich kann Python and C Sharp, that that conveys the idea that you can Python and C Sharp. I hope you get the idea. But not always, okay? Not always you use the Modalverb können. Here it's kann conjugated for ich, and don't use a verb. You should use the verb, but in spoken German, you don't really have to when you're for this context only when you're talking about your skills. All right. Here the conjunction und is used to combine two different sentences. Ich studiere is one sentence. Ich arbeite is another sentence. Please note that the sentence structure does not change after und. So you still have the verb at the second position if you just look at it as one sentence. So verb second position and the subject before it. Again, verb second, subject before it. Here the conjunction aber is used to combine two sentences. Please note that the sentence structure does not change here as well. So you still have the subject ish at the first position after the conjunction aber. Please remember to add a comma before aber. That's how it is. This example is interesting. Here after aber, you do not actually have a complete sentence. You are just adding more information to the previous sentence. Actually, you don't even need aber over here, so you can just say man kann. So here the sentence says man kann arbeiten, aber nur 20 Stunden pro Woche. But you don't need this, you can just add this nur 20 Stunden pro Woche between the Modalverb and the verb. So you can say man kann nur 20 Stunden pro Woche arbeiten. This is easy to follow. Die Sessions sind am Montag und Donnerstag. here you use the conjunction oder. So wir können ins Fitnessstudio gehen oder wir gehen ins Schwimmbad. Please see how I'm pronouncing it. I'm not saying oder, okay? You don't have to pronounce this R at the end. It's not aber. If you say aber, it's fine, but even more correct way to say this is if you just say aber. I hope you could. I hope it's the difference is obvious when I'm saying it. Please note the sentence before oder has modal verb and a verb. After oder, there is just a verb. So why I'm doing this is to motivate you or to give you a hint that now you should start writing complicated sentences. Okay, sometimes you write just in sentence here you have a verb, and sometimes you use modal verb and the verb, and then you use these conjunctions to describe your daily life or aspects of your life that are important for you. All right, homework for you. As I already said, please write simple sentences, then write them again in German, and then you write for today's homework in Präteritum, then write them again using Partizip 2. Few more homework are, so you already know the modal verben. As I said, Präteritum is not that often used in spoken German, but there are some exceptions, and one important exception is the modal verben. So you should know the Präteritum too, Präteritum for each of the modal verb. Please remember it will be different for each pronoun. Also, quite often, at least for me, people usually ask, when we are interacting, they just say, Was hast du heute gemacht? Okay. This can be your supervisor, this can be your friend or your colleague. And it's always good to have an answer, even better to have the answer ready in German. So please try to write something about your day that you would like to talk about. All right, you may try this out. This is an advice from me if you want to improve your German at a high speed. Okay, if you happen to find any mistake or typos on the slides, please mm, let us know in the comment section. Also, if there was a slip of tongue from my side, I said something which was not correct for the German language, please point that out as well. One more thing I would like to mention is that these videos do not contain everything that I discuss or that I try to assist you in learning during the live sessions. So it will not be a bad idea if you decide to join the live sessions. You can get in touch by writing an email to practicalgermanteacher@gmail.com. All right. Thank you for listening.